Most stories begin with a destination. This one begins with a man, a truck, and a road that had no end. He called himself Joe, 39 years old, a long-haul driver from California who'd seen nearly every stretch of asphalt from the Mojave to Montana. You know the kind. A man who lives off truck stop coffee and stale donuts, with hands calloused from decades behind the wheel and a gaze carved deep by sleepless nights. But there was something about Joe, something even more weathered than his truck's peeling paint or his sunburned forearms. You could see it in his eyes. Not fear exactly, but an alertness. The kind of awareness only a man who's been hunted carries. Joe didn't look like the kind of guy who'd flinch easily. He'd hauled freight through desert lightning storms, patched tire blowouts in sub-zero snow, and even wrestled with a coyote once just to protect a cooler of beef in the back. But there were moments when Joe, for reasons he never explained, would pull off the road, shut down the engine, and sit, completely still, watching his mirrors, listening, breathing like the whole truck might vanish if he exhaled too loudly. It started one September night. The air was dry and the horizon glowed faint orange under the pollution haze of Los Angeles. Joe had just picked up a load of metal fittings from a warehouse in Redding. The drop-off was in San Bernardino, a long but familiar stretch of road that took him down the I-5 corridor, his bread and butter. He knew the weight of his rig, the curves of the highway, and the ghost towns dotting the valley like fading bruises. There was nothing unusual about the trip. That is, until he passed a place he'd never seen on the map. A narrow exit marked only by a rusted sign that read Elms. No population marker, no gas price indicator, just 5 letters barely clinging to the signpost. Joe didn't mean to take the exit. He swore he didn't even touch the wheel. But his rig veered off gently, as if pulled by something not mechanical. The road narrowed. The lights of the freeway disappeared behind him. He figured he'd find a diner, maybe a place to grab a warm meal before clocking out for a few hours. But there were no diners, no lights, just trees. Tall ones, strange ones. Pines maybe, but too thick at the trunk. The road was blacktop but cracked, older than the interstate by at least 30 years. Joe drove on, for 10 minutes, then 20. Then his headlights flickered. Not once, not like a loose bulb. They dimmed in a way that made everything in front of him look softer, fuzzy, unreal. And that's when he saw it. A man, no taller than 6 feet, standing by the edge of the road, drenched to the bone. Even though the sky above was dry and empty, the man wore a long trench coat that glistened under Joe's lights, as if soaked in oil instead of water. His face was tilted up, not toward Joe, but toward the sky, as though listening for something. Joe slowed down. The rig hissed. The man didn't move. Then, just as Joe passed him, the man turned. He didn't wave, didn't speak. He simply stared. A stare so sharp it carved into Joe's ribs and stayed there. Joe blinked. The man vanished. Not walked off. Not faded. Gone. The road turned bright again. The trees thinned. Ahead, Joe saw a junction back onto the interstate, exactly where he should have been. Joe didn't tell anyone. You might wonder why. You see, men like Joe, men who work 70 hours a week just to make ends meet, don't call out ghost stories at rest stops. They shove it down. They keep driving. But that wasn't the first time Joe had seen that man. No, that was the 4th. Each time, same trench coat, same blank expression, same disappearance. But this time, Joe felt different, like the road had tried to speak. When he reached San Bernardino, Joe parked the truck behind a warehouse near Mill Street. The air was still. His body screamed for rest, but he didn't sleep. Instead, he walked to the back of the building where a line of dusty payphones still clung to relevance. He fumbled with quarters, breathing heavier than usual. He dialed a number he hadn't touched in 6 years. It rang, then picked up. A voice on the other end. Rough, impatient. "Yeah, Travis," Joe said. "It's me." Silence. Then the voice, this time lower. "Did it show up again?" Joe swallowed. "Yeah, but this time, I think it saw me." Travis Pinter, a former driver turned investigator. Not the kind you hire to find lost property. The kind you call when reality stops making sense. Paranormal events, ghosts, shadows that don't move right. He'd once been featured in a fringe trucker magazine for chasing a highway poltergeist in Arkansas. Most laughed at him. Joe didn't. They agreed to meet 3 days later at a truck stop near Fresno. Middle of nowhere, less chance of being heard. The night before that meeting, Joe stayed in a motel that smelled like bleach and cigarettes. He didn't sleep. He didn't watch TV. He sat at the edge of the bed, curtains drawn, staring at the mirror. Not at his reflection, past it. And just before sunrise, something knocked at the motel door. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Joe approached. Quiet, careful. He looked through the peephole. Nothing. Then a second knock. From the window. Still with me? Because this story, it's not about whether you believe in ghosts. It's about what happens when you do. When you've seen something that doesn't belong to this world and it won't leave you alone. Joe's story was only just beginning, and the deeper he dug, the more he realized he wasn't alone on those roads. Not now, not ever, because something rides with the freight, something that remembers, and that's just chapter 1. Ready for the next chapter? Because when the truth finally hits the pavement, it doesn't stop until someone pays. There's a point on every road where headlights don't reach, where GPS signals drop off, and no sign will tell you how far you've gone. For Joe, that place wasn't on a map. It lived in his memory, just beyond where sanity stopped making sense. And on the 3rd day after his last sighting of the man in the trench coat, Joe came face to face with something even darker than the night sky above I-5. He met Travis Pinter in the middle of nowhere, off Route 99, a truck stop carved into the dusty outskirts of Fresno. The air smelled like fried grease and burnt rubber, and inside the diner, a jukebox hummed but didn't sing. Travis was in a booth in the far corner, a man who didn't blend in but didn't care to stand out either. He wore an old trucker cap, a flannel with one sleeve rolled up, and eyes that scanned everything twice before settling on Joe. Without a word, Joe slid into the seat opposite him. Travis didn't say hello. He didn't ask how Joe had been. He only said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning." So Joe did. He described the trench coat, the drenched look, the fog that made his engine whisper instead of roar. He mentioned the way his truck veered off the road without him and how the man was always there. Closer each time, more solid than the last. Travis nodded slowly, waiting until the story was told in full. Then he reached under the table and pulled out a battered manila folder, sliding it across the greasy tabletop. Joe opened it. Inside were photographs, black and white, grainy and faded with age. A few looked like they had been taken from security cameras on rural highways. Others were clearly snapped through windshields, with timestamps burned into the corners. One photo made Joe stiffen. There he was, the same man, the same long coat, drenched, head tilted just slightly, his face pale, almost translucent, yet unmistakably real. Joe looked up, voice caught in his throat. "This is him." Travis nodded again. "I figured. Who is he?" "We don't know, but truckers like us, we call him the hanger, because once you see him, he hangs on. To your route, to your thoughts, to your damn life. He doesn't just appear. He clings." Joe swallowed hard. "Why me?" Travis leaned forward. Because you didn't just cross his path. You crossed into something. There are places out there, roads you're not supposed to take. Some exits lead somewhere else entirely. You found one. I didn't mean to. Doesn't matter, Travis interrupted. The door opened, and now it's cracked. You're leaking something through. Joe stared at the coffee in front of him. Steam curled in slow, unnatural patterns. Travis flipped to another page. It was a map, hand-drawn, roads scribbled in red ink and certain spots circled heavily. One of the circles glared up at them like an open wound. Elms, Joe whispered. Travis tapped it. That exit you took doesn't exist. Not officially. Not in state records. Not in any of my underground directories either. I had to dig deep just to find whispers. But I've heard it before. Drivers who vanish. CB signals that go dead and never come back. The few that made it out barely spoke again. Joe's hands trembled. He hid them under the table. That night, Travis insisted they visit a place only spoken of in hushed tones among long haulers. A fuel depot off Route 138, officially closed in 1991 after a fire. But the story was it never truly closed. Some claimed it reopened when the timing was right. For those chosen or cursed by what rides the lanes of forgotten roads. They arrived close to midnight. The depot was locked behind a rusted gate, chain looped like a noose around a deadbolt. Travis snapped it with bolt cutters like it was paper. As they walked through the cracked pavement, Joe felt the temperature drop by 10 degrees. The air was still. The scent, iron and mildew, like old blood in an attic. The dispatch building stood at the center. Its walls were peeling, but lights were flickering inside. Electricity where none should exist. This isn't just a location, Travis said. It's a threshold, a thin place. If he's following you, this is where he'll come through. Why bring me here? Because I need to know if it's you or something else. The dispatch office was still intact. Barely. Rusted chairs. A desk split down the center. Maps pinned across walls, some marked with unfamiliar coordinates. One map had elms circled over and over in dark red. And then the lights went out. Complete darkness. Total silence. No wind. No bugs. No hum of electricity. Just the sound of their own breath. Travis turned on a flashlight. The beam cut through the black, bouncing off cracked glass and mold-stained walls. And then, footsteps. Deliberate. Measured. Getting closer. Joe whispered, "You hear that?" Travis gripped his flashlight tighter. "We need to move. Now." But the door behind them wasn't there anymore. It had stretched. The hallway longer than it had been seconds ago. The doors along the side were closer together, narrower, and breathing? Joe grabbed Travis by the arm. "We're not alone." "No," Travis said. "We're not." They ran. The hallway didn't end. It shifted, turned when it shouldn't. The walls pulsed. Travis yelled something, but Joe couldn't hear him anymore. His ears were ringing, like they'd gone underwater. Then sudden cold. They burst through what should have been an emergency exit, but opened into open ground. Dirt and weeds. No truck. No depot. Just empty terrain. Joe spun in circles. "Where's the rig? Where's the road?" Travis didn't answer. He stared at the sky. Joe followed his gaze. The stars were wrong. Not just out of place, foreign. Constellations twisted like broken symbols. Colors that didn't exist in the normal spectrum shimmered faintly, like bruises on a god's skin. "We're not in California anymore," Travis muttered. "What the hell does that mean?" Travis started walking, fast. Joe followed. The ground beneath them crunched like glass. The air got thicker with each step. until finally, in the distance, a building, lit, neon sign humming, a diner, of course, because even in nightmares, you still need somewhere to stop. The bell over the door chimed as they walked in. Inside was warm, too warm. A woman stood behind the counter, still, pale, as if carved. "Coffee?" she asked. Joe nodded. She poured 2 mugs, but her hands never moved. He looked around. No other patrons. No sounds but the clink of cups. Joe tried to ask where they were. She didn't blink, just said, "Still between." "Between what?" She smiled. "Between your world and his." Joe turned, and there he was, the man in the trench coat, standing just outside the glass window, watching. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. But the diner's light warped around him like a fire seen through water. Joe froze. Travis stood slowly. "Don't engage. Don't look away either." "He's waiting," Joe whispered. "He always is," Travis replied. Joe stepped toward the window. The man tilted his head slightly, as if curious or amused, and then the lights flickered. The windows fogged from the inside. Joe's coffee cup shattered on the floor. The woman behind the counter vanished, gone, as if she'd never been there. Outside, the man raised one hand, just one, and pointed. "Joe." Travis grabbed him, pulled him away. "We have to go." The back door burst open with a gust of wind that smelled of scorched oil and static. They ran again, but not back into the landscape they came from. This road was darker, unpaved, and waiting, because once you cross into the thin places, there's no guarantee you'll ever find the edge again. And that right there is where Act 2 ends. Still think this is just another roadside ghost tale? You haven't seen what's waiting at mile marker 0. Chapter 3 will show you the cost of knowing too much, and why some exits don't lead anywhere you can return from. Shall we keep going? Some roads take you home. Others take you back to places you swore you left behind. But there are roads, rare, silent, pulsing just beneath the surface, that take you inward. Joe and Travis had crossed onto one of those roads. They didn't remember leaving the diner. Not really. 1 minute they were standing in that warmthless space, watching the man in the trench coat through the fogged-up glass. The next, they were walking, step after step, like sleepwalkers drifting across a landscape stitched together from memory and shadow. The road beneath them wasn't paved. Not exactly gravel either. Felt soft, like old skin. There were no stars now, just a gray ceiling overhead. A sky with no source of light. It looked like dawn but never changed. The kind of false light that never grows or fades. "Where are we?" Joe asked again, his voice cracking. Travis didn't answer. His face was pale, focused, unreadable. In the distance, a shape loomed. Not a building, not a tree, something else. White, long, familiar. Joe squinted. "That's my truck." It sat tilted on the edge of the road like a wounded animal, one wheel buried in the soft shoulder. The hazard lights blinked, too slow, too red. The entire cab looked warped, like it had been melted and reassembled by something that didn't understand trucks. Joe ran to it, threw open the door. The seat was covered in water, not just damp, soaking wet, as though the truck had been submerged. The radio buzzed, whispering static that didn't sound like any station. Every few seconds, a word hissed through. "Behind. Mirror. You." Joe turned to look. Nothing. Just Travis watching. "I don't get it," Joe said. "Why bring me here? Why show me this?" "I didn't bring you," Travis said, quietly. "You brought us." That's when Joe realized something. He wasn't cold anymore. Not scared either. Not in the way he had been. What he felt now was deeper, heavier. like grief for something not yet lost. He opened the glove box. Inside was a photo. It was of him, younger, smiling, sitting on the edge of a dock with a little girl on his lap. His daughter. She died 2 years ago. Crash. A freak accident. This photo wasn't one he recognized. She looked older, maybe 7 or 8. In the photo, they were both laughing. Joe stumbled back. What the hell is this? Travis didn't look at the picture. Sometimes the things that follow us feed on our regrets. They wear them, offer glimpses of what could have been, what never was. They confuse time, memory, meaning. Joe's voice was hollow. That photo isn't real. Maybe not, Travis said, but your reaction is. Behind them, the fog started to move. It wasn't being blown by wind. It was crawling. Joe shut the door and backed away. The hazard lights blinked one last time and then died. The truck groaned, like it exhaled, and went still. Travis motioned forward. We keep walking. The fog chased them for miles, or what felt like miles. The road twisted. At times, it looped on itself. Joe noticed they were passing the same dead bird on the side of the road again and again, but each time it was more decayed. Eventually, it was just feathers, then nothing. At some point, a sign appeared. It was crooked, rusted, nailed to a rotting post. Mile marker 0. Travis stopped. This is it. Joe panted. What's it? The end of the road. Joe looked ahead. There was a narrow bridge over what looked like a dry ravine. Beyond it, the fog grew darker. We cross, Travis said. Into what? Travis shook his head. That's not the point. The hangar doesn't want you dead. He wants you to remember, to relive, to decide whether you stay in his world or step out. Joe was frozen. And if I cross that bridge, you'll see the truth. Joe looked down at the photo again. His daughter's face, her hands curled around his. He took a step, then another. The bridge creaked. The fog on the other side pulsed with a heartbeat he could feel in his chest. At the midpoint, the world changed. The bridge vanished. The sky cracked, and Joe was standing in the middle of a familiar road. Sunlight, trees, cars, California. He turned, and behind him was the man in the coat, standing at the edge of the woods, trench-soaked, face unreadable, but this time closer. You chose to look, Travis's voice whispered somewhere behind him. That's all he needed. Joe fell to his knees, because it wasn't over, not even close. The worst part about making it out is realizing you never really left. Joe stood on a road that looked familiar. He knew the bend ahead, the service station sign in the distance, the rusted guardrail beside the pine trees. This was Route 46 near Paso Robles. He'd driven it 100 times, but nothing felt right. The air smelled too clean, the breeze too soft. A woman jogged past on the opposite shoulder, her ponytail bouncing, but her footsteps made no sound. A pickup rumbled by, but didn't stir up a single leaf. It felt like a memory replaying itself with the volume turned down. Joe blinked hard. Once, twice, still there. He turned back, no fog, no trench coat, no Travis. The bridge behind him, gone. He reached for his phone. No signal. The screen refused to unlock. The time frozen at 4:04 a.m. A sharp sound cracked through the air. A horn. His truck. It was behind him now, parked in the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. And in the passenger seat, Travis. Joe ran over, pulled the door. It opened, but Travis didn't turn to him, didn't move. He stared straight ahead, eyes glassy, lips slightly parted, like a man halfway between sleep and speech. Joe climbed in. Travis? He whispered. No response. Joe reached forward and snapped his fingers in front of Travis's face. That's when the radio switched on. No buttons pressed, just on. A voice came through, hollow, familiar, slow. "Do you see now?" Joe stiffened. The radio crackled again. "Do you understand why the road bends for you?" Then silence. Travis blinked once, twice, then exhaled sharply and looked over. "You saw it, didn't you?" "I saw something," Joe whispered, "but it wasn't real. None of it was." Travis gave him a look that felt older than anything Joe had ever seen. "It's more real than this." Joe's mouth went dry. "What are you saying?" Travis leaned forward, pointing through the windshield. "Drive." Joe hesitated. "I said drive." He obeyed. The engine roared. The road unfurled. The world outside blurred in ways it shouldn't. The trees leaned too far inward. The clouds stopped moving. There were no other cars now. Joe kept driving, and Travis began to speak. "There are cracks," he said. "Cracks in everything. Reality, memory, emotion. Some people never see them. Others, they fall through." Joe gripped the wheel harder. "Why me?" "Because you've lost something," Travis said. "Loss creates gaps. Regret widens them. Pain holds them open." Joe clenched his jaw. "My daughter," Travis nodded. "She was the moment." Joe's vision blurred with tears. "You kept driving after she died," Travis said. "But part of you stayed back there, grieving. That grief became a tether, and something followed it." Joe wiped his face with the back of his hand. "The hanger. He's not just a spirit," Travis said. "He's not a ghost. He's a watcher, collector. He doesn't choose at random. He comes when reality begins to weaken. He walks behind those who walk with the dead." Joe's hands began to tremble. "Then how do I stop him?" "You don't," Travis said. "But you might escape him if you face what you've buried." The road began to change again, not in shape but in texture. The blacktop turned to dirt. The horizon twisted upward like a spiral staircase made of sky. Joe's breath caught. The truck stopped, on its own, and there he was, the hanger, standing in the middle of the road, palms out. Joe opened the door. Travis grabbed his arm. "You don't have to go to him." "I do." Joe stepped down. The ground felt wet. It hadn't rained. The hanger didn't move, but his face was different now, closer to human. Not familiar, but knowable. There was sorrow there, and something else. Recognition. Joe stopped 5 feet away. "What do you want from me?" he asked. The hanger didn't speak. He just reached into his coat. Joe tensed, but what he pulled out was the photo, the one of Joe and his daughter. But it was changing. The girl aged in real time, 7, 9, 11, then stopped, 15. She looked directly at Joe and smiled. Joe fell to his knees. The hanger stepped forward and placed the photo on the ground between them. Then he backed away and vanished. No sound, no light, just gone. Joe sat there for minutes, maybe hours. Eventually, Travis came and helped him up. "What just happened?" Joe asked. Travis didn't answer right away. Then, "He gave you closure, but he took something in return." Joe looked around. "What?" Travis looked at the truck. "Your route." Joe stared. The keys were gone. The maps were blank. The CB radio only hissed. Joe whispered, "I'm not going back, am I?" Travis shook his head. "No, but you'll go forward." They stood in silence until Joe turned and asked, "Where does this road lead?" Travis pointed east, to the truth, or what's left of it. They started walking, one step at a time, as the light faded again and the sky blinked with strange stars. You've just heard the final part of The Truck Driver from California. But if you think this was the end of things crossing between worlds, you haven't seen what they witnessed near the Chernobyl explosion. Click on the video on your screen now to uncover the secrets no one was meant to survive. Because some stories aren't stories at all. They're warnings, and the next one starts with a scream.